Greetings, folks, and welcome back to Patriot to the Core podcast. I am Thad Forrester. This is episode number 83. Thank you for joining me again this week. Today's guest is Mark Lauren, Bodyweight Master. This is his third time on the show, and Mark is a former United States Air Force Combat Controller and instructor. He is an author of several books, including You Are Your Own Gym, the Bible of Bodyweight Exercises. I have that book. I got it shortly after it came out in 2010. He has a new book coming out in October called Strong and Lean, 9-minute daily workouts to build your best body. I have pre-ordered that, but I've been following Mark Lauren's app, his program, since January of 2018. He provides a discount code for listeners today, so if you go to marklauren.com and sign up for get an annual subscription, you get 20% off by using the promo code PATRIOT. We cover a lot of stuff in this episode: basic health, fitness for middle-aged men, recovery, some specific exercises from his programs, all kinds of stuff. Ibuprofen/Advil. So let's get in and talk to Mark. Mark, greetings from Thailand for you. I saw in the news last night that there's some rival monkey gangs going on in Thailand. What's going on with that?
Oh, I guess they're not. The tourists are gone, so they're not being fed. And I think that's what you're talking about. So that there's probably, the competition is fiercer for whatever food is left over. But yeah, they battle.
I had no clue what that was about, but I saw a clip on the news last night. So my favorite fitness guy and guru, thanks for being on the show again. I believe this is the third time that you've been on Patriot to the Core. Being physically fit and healthy is not as hard as many people think. Would you agree, and why is that?
I think if you know what's really needed, it's not nearly as difficult or time consuming as people often make it.
Does it require that we understand our own needs, or is that even?
I think absolutely, and even how we define fitness. I think when we think about fitness, a lot of times we, in Western culture, we're thinking about like the men and women we might see on Instagram, and sure they're fit, but they're very muscular. They're kind of on an extreme end of something. But really, if fitness to me is just about being able to live your life really well, and being able to do that into old age, which is about general preparation. And what is general preparation? I guess general preparation is you can do all the common and basic things really well, right? You're generally prepared. And you also have the ability to learn new things, as easily as possible, because all your fundamentals are already in place, right? So more complex skills, for example, they're still made up of the fundamentals, because fundamentals are, the thing that makes something fundamental is that it's always being used. So I think, how we define fitness is really important. And I think when we look at fitness as more of from a survival and preparation standpoint, then it starts to kind of shed a lot of light on what's needed and what's not really needed. And even if you want to get to those higher levels where you have, this really beautiful body, let's say, or you're really strong or really fast or something like that, those things have to be built on a strong foundation. And the foundation is made up of the fundamentals, the basics.
What are some of the basics?
Your joint functions. You have to, for example, a really basic element of physical fitness is having healthy joints. And one of the ways that we develop and maintain healthy joints is just by training all the different joint functions that we have, right? So your spine, for example, if you bend forward, you have flexion. If you look up, you have extension. If you tilt to the side or to the sides, you have side to side lateral. You have lateral flexion and extension. If you turn your head, you have rotation, and you also have circumduction, making circles. So those are the functions of your spine. You also have that for your hips. You have flexion, extension, rotation, abduction, adduction, etc., right? So you take your pelvis, your shoulders, your spine, your hips, and a really basic fundamental part of fitness is making sure that you have all those different functions, right? And if you think about it, if one of those functions is missing, and then you try to play some more complex sport or participate in some activity where one of those joint functions is needed, it's going to be much harder for you to learn that new activity, or your performance just won't be what it could be because that function is missing. So by training those basics, right, we ensure that you have all the joint functions needed for more complex activities, but we train those basic joint functions in really simple situations, which is bodyweight rehab that you're familiar with, where we lie on the floor, front lying, back lying, side lying positions, and we just go through all the different joint functions.
They feel
so that's just
good.
One example.
I love doing those like on a Sunday morning or
I just did them.
You just did them?
I just did them like an hour ago, yeah.
Sometimes I do them in the morning. Most of the time it's in the evening. But yeah, I love those.
Yeah, it's amazing how it's very little energy is needed to make ourselves feel better, to improve coordinate. Basically, very little energy is needed to improve, a very basic aspect of fitness, like joint functions, coordination, and basic mobility. When you have a better idea of what your actual needs are. It's amazing how much feedback I get, for example, from people that say, hey, I had shoulder pain or hip pain, and, within a month of doing the prep program or a couple months of the prep program, this pain I've had for 10 years is gone. And I think really what that's all about too is that's another thing about fitness is I think we make it harder than it needs to be, and we make it harder than it should be a lot of times. So I think one of the most common mistakes is that when people have had a long layoff, like you haven't been working out like you should, and or for years, or possibly never. But usually the problem, I think, is we stop working out for some reason, and then when we get back into it, we have some expectation of where we should be because of where we left off. And who knows, maybe that was 10 years ago, maybe it was 2 years ago, maybe it was a month ago, right? But detraining is very fast. But instead of basically starting over and doing something very simple and easy and short, we kind of jump back in where we think we should be. And then we end up doing too much. And then we're super sore, we're super tired, the cost is high, and then the behavior ends up stopping because of that.
Mm-hmm.
I think a really super important part of fitness is absolutely smart progressions and regressions.
I apologize for bringing this up again, but my Achilles rupture was it really has affected me so greatly. But when I had that in March of 20, obviously I couldn't do all of I think at that point I was probably doing the daily workouts. Well, I couldn't do them. I had a cast, but what I could do is probably almost every one of the rehab workouts, because I was laying on my side, on my back, on the front, and if there was one where I may have had to do a step, I didn't do that. But there's still so much if you have an injury or if you have a cast or a brace that you can still do while you're injured.
Absolutely. And I think even with smaller things that happen in regular sort of day-to-day life, like you're just tired, you didn't get a full night of sleep, who knows, maybe you went out and had some beers with your buddies, right? You're not really ready to have a full-on workout, but you can still do something very simple and easy that's extremely useful to you.
Yeah, that's a good point, because sometimes when I'm dead tired, the kids won't go to sleep, and I can do something. I can do rehab, and it feels really good. One thing that we wanted to make sure we talked about was middle-aged men, which you and I are officially considered. And I don't know really what that age kind of range is, but I guess it's pretty subjective. But how are the physical needs of middle-aged males different from younger males?
I think when you're young, you're extremely tolerant of inefficiency. Basically, as you get older, your exercise programs, in order to be effective, need to be more balanced. And you have to do the right things, obviously. You have to do the right things in the right balance, in the right amount. And of course, that's also what's ideal for younger people. But for younger people, it's just not as obvious because they have naturally a super high work capacity. Young kids, for example, they run around and, they're playing all day long. I remember coming to Thailand and training here at the Thai boxing camps, and the young kids were training 3 to 4 hours twice a day, 6 days a week, which was I couldn't keep up. But the young kids were playing soccer in between training sessions.
They had to be sleeping good at night.
It's mind blowing. And, in a similar way, if I think back to when I was on a team, for example, we would train hard and we would play hard. And we would go out and in the evenings have fun until the wee hours in the morning, and then wake up early in the morning, do PT, gear up, jump out of airplane, do mission planning, etc. And that was nonstop, and it worked for me. It worked for all of us, right? Because I think again, like when you're young, you have enormous capacity for inefficiency. I think that's one good way to look at it. As you get older, you have to become more efficient, which basically means, how do you become more efficient? You have to get rid of unnecessary things. But being able to distinguish between necessary and unnecessary, of course, requires knowing what your needs are. And, that's really something that I put a ton of attention on, is trying to clearly define things. Like, what is fitness? And what are these fundamentals? Like, what are fundamentals? Fundamentals are the things that get used the most. And so what exactly are these athletic fundamentals so that we can create logical progressions out of them? Plainly put, then, I think the needs of middle-aged men versus young men, they're pretty much the same, except that, your capacity for inefficiency is much lower. So, yeah, you have to train smarter. And I think, again, like one of the things, too, is that when you're young, you can do pretty much anything. And, of course, your body's going to adapt. Like, you're going to get leaner. You're going to get more muscular. It doesn't necessarily mean that, just because you're lean and muscular, it doesn't really mean that you're athletic. And we can go to any gym and prove that. A lot of these, like, especially the bigger guys, they can hardly walk right. God forbid you take them to the pool or take them climbing or take them on a run. The fundamentals have to be in place, and it just becomes more obvious when we're middle-aged, because when the fundamentals aren't in place, and again, like, what are the fundamentals? Like, when certain joint functions aren't in place, we get a lot of feedback on that, because there's certain movements that we just can't do as well. And of course, there's pain, right? Because the muscles around your joints are out of balance. So a lot of times what happens is, you have certain movements that are highly repetitive on a day-to-day basis, like sitting at a desk typing, right? So your body adapts to those repetitive type of movements by making certain muscles tighter, other ones become kind of more lax, and then basically the tension around the joints from the muscles is uneven, and that creates instability. And I think a lot of the pain that we experience comes from the nervous system basically sensing this instability, and then it basically prevents certain movements, or it disincentivizes certain movements with pain because there's instability. So really super easy way, again, and I think that's one of the reasons why bodyweight rehab does so much to eliminate pain and improve basic mobility, because all you're really doing is, you're going through all the different functions of your hips, your spine, and your shoulders in these different lying positions. And one of the things that it does is it evens out the tension around the joints. Because for your shoulders, for example, you're not just going straight forward and back like you would. A lot of the movements we do in day-to-day life, they're on that sagittal plane, front to back. And when we exercise, we do that a lot of times as well. Everything's front to back, bench pressing, pulling, overhead press. It's all sort of front to back. But what about rotation, making circles, abduction, adduction, horizontal flexion and extension, things like that, right? So by putting our joints through all these different functions, evening out the muscular tension around those joints, that helps to get rid of a lot of pain. And then also, I think by doing a lot of, and I think so basically what I'm getting at is I think one thing that I've experienced with my own training is that it's really important for me these days to not just do hard workouts. I can't just go balls to the wall all the time. It's not healthy. A lot of my workouts, I would say most of my workouts, are low to medium intensity. Every once in a while I'll get some. And there's huge benefit in these easy workouts, especially the ones where you're putting your joints through a full range of motion with all the different functions. And that is, it lets your nervous system know that these ranges of motion are safe, right? So you're kind of regressing to a point where you can do something without pain, and then the nervous system gets it, oh, okay, that's safe, and it'll actually a lot of times decrease pain or eliminate pain because of that as well. And then from there we can progress. by just by challenging those functions in different ways so that there's a progression.
Do you ever get to the point where you have to take ibuprofen or Advil, from such a hard workout?
Of course. But I would actually say, when I was about 35, I used to train very hard, and all my workouts were they were balls to the wall. I mean, every single one, I was just going at it as hard as I possibly could, and that definitely took its toll. So, I mean, to answer your last question about the difference between younger men and middle-aged men is you have to be able to dial in your intensity. You got to be able to. You have to know when to stop when you're older. And I think, especially when you come from certain communities and a certain mindset, that can be really hard, knowing when to stop or knowing when to just have a light, easy workout. But yeah, so I mean, when I was 35, I was taking ibuprofen, Ranger candy on a regular basis. But that's really what led me to developing Bodyweight Training 2.0 that you're familiar with. And for that program, I got with Rafael Ruiz. That, I mean, he's an amazing strength and conditioning coach with a pretty amazing track record. We got together with the intention of developing a bodyweight exercise program that covers all the fundamentals. And again, one of the things that we had on our checklist of things that have to be covered are all the different functions of the joints, especially the hips, spine, and shoulders. And then, of course, developmental movements like the transitions between lying and standing positions, and then also exercises in standing positions and mobility. And that exercise program absolutely transformed me as an athlete. It was a pretty miraculous sort of about face. And I really don't think I'd be able to do what I'm doing now at the level that I'm doing it if it wasn't for that change in mindset where I go from basically, just going balls to the wall with, more conventional exercises like push-ups and all these really hard, difficult exercises that, they're impressive, but is it really what you need? Do you need to be able to do unassisted handstand push-ups or front levers, back levers? So yeah, that transition in thinking and how I approach fitness and really kind of valuing the basics is it's allowed me to function and not eat ibuprofen all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, not nearly like I used to.
Yeah, yesterday was one of those days where I had to take some. I had a rare day for me, but it was a great day. I got up early and I rucked 2 miles with 20 pounds in my pack. And then and it was a pretty flat area. And then I rode my bike 5 miles later, like midday. And then I played tennis last night. And I got home about a little after 10 o'clock. It's real humid this week and hot. And so yesterday was one of those days I had to have some ibuprofen to help me sleep.
That's a decent workload there.
Yeah, that felt good for sure. I wanted to tell you how, without boring everybody, I wanted to give you some examples of how you have helped me. And 100% I attribute this to following your programs since I've been following you since January of 2018, right when your app launched, your web-based app at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I got that year right. Wasn't it 2018?
That's right.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
So like my shoulders, my brother Mark and I always said we had fairy shoulders. He had to have surgery before he went into the Air Force. I've never had surgery, but I have a weak shoulder. I can attribute it to a specific instance of what happened. But so what it did is when I used to play tennis regularly, at least once a week. I was in a league for years and years. But I always had to warm up my serves for a long time, a lot longer than everybody else. And most all the guys I played with were a lot older than me. But I was the one they were waiting on. I was trying to get my shoulder loosened up. I couldn't just start out hitting hard. In fact, I was saying that to myself when I was playing tennis in March of 20. The day I tore my Achilles, I was kind of saying that to myself. I was like, you know what? My shoulder is not hurting. I don't have to warm up anymore. Because I had taken kind of a few year break of tennis, and so I didn't know that it was doing better. And then, of course, my Achilles popped and I had a whole different problem. But, some of those shoulder movements, like the ones I think that feel the best to me are the S-reach, the pointers, and I can't remember the pointers the ones I like the most are when you're laying on your stomach and your hands are on your lower back and you do one at a time, point straight out front.